My name is Katy Rogers, and I am president of the Catalogue Raisonné Scholars Association and the programs director, and Robert Motherwell, Catalogue Raisonné director here at the Dedalus Foundation. And this is my co-organizer, Sharon Hecker. And for anyone who wasn't here yesterday, Sharon gave a really beautiful overview of issues that we hope to address in this conference. We are recording as much as possible. Some people are unable to be recorded due to other limitations, but many of the panels will be available online afterwards, so if you missed anything. So this morning we just wanted to give kind of a brief summation of yesterday. We had so many interesting panels across many different eras and periods and viewpoints: the legal viewpoint, the conservator's viewpoint, scholarship, foundations. And I think Sharon and I were talking this morning, this is maybe one of the few or only conferences where you really have that intersection between scholarship and the market and conservation. And that's really key to what we're talking about here. One of our last speakers yesterday, Mira Rajan, she talked a lot about the lawyerly point of view from copyright law and moral rights. And something that she was really advocating for is dialogue and that conversation between people in these different fields and how important that is to move forward on this important issue of posthumous casts, but also in all of our work. And I think that we're hoping today and yesterday really accomplishes that as much as anything else. Did you have anything to add? No?
Just the practical issues, maybe?
Just the practical issues. Okay, so we have a very full day today. We will start with 2 panels this morning, lunch break, and 2 panels this afternoon. We know a lot of people are in town for the art fairs, and some folks have to leave this afternoon. So we will abbreviate the first panel a little bit, partly for practical concerns. Helen Shiner is ill and unable to attend. So we'll have one less speaker on the first panel, and then we'll also abbreviate the break a little bit. We'll only do 10 or 15 minutes instead of 25. And that way we'll be able to start lunch a little early for folks to leave if they need to. And I think that is it for this morning. And I will go ahead and introduce our first panel. We're so pleased to have Mette Carlsen here talking. I've known Mette for a few years now. And there you are, Mette. At the Judd Foundation when I was there working with her. So Mette has a background in sculpture conservation from the Academy of Fine Arts in Copenhagen, where she specialized in conservation of modern and contemporary art. During her professional life, Mette has worked for major museums and institutions with diverse collections, ranging from antiquity to the present day, including Tate in London, the National Museum of Art Design and Architecture in Norway, and New Carlsberg Glyptotek. And she's also worked at Judd Foundation in Marfa, Texas. She worked there for 6 years, both in conservation and collections, so she's going to bring that perspective of the object. Through Mette's engagement in artist foundations and her long experience with collections and preventative conservation, Mette has developed a deep interest in the preservation of artists' legacies. She now works as an independent artist estate advisor. So Mette will go ahead and introduce our panel. So we have our speakers here today, and then Q&A will be at the end of each panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Katy. Good morning. It's nice to be here again. And thank you, Katy, and thank you, Sharon, for this wonderful event and these very interesting panels that you have put together where we get these different perspectives which really complement each other. And I think that we'll see that this morning as well. With Laura, that is from the Dalí, Salvador Dalí Foundation, and she's working on the Catalogue Raisonné for sculpture. And with Philip and Joyce from Masterpiece, the art fair in London. But just before we start with the panels, I would just like to bring in some paintings and something that I heard just recently. And that was when the film was made about Jackson Pollock some years back. Then the foundation was approached, the Pollock Krasner Foundation was approached about that the film would like to make some copies of some of the paintings for set designs. And the foundation agreed to this. And then it turned out that more than 100 copies of paintings were made. And they were made in different stages. Some of them were not finished paintings, some of them were finished paintings. Some of them were not that good copies, and some of them actually turned out to be really good copies. So now these paintings, they exist out in the world. And then the foundation found it necessary actually to create a Catalogue Raisonné over these paintings. Because, of course, they were concerned about the life of these paintings and what will happen with time. And I just want to bring it up because I think it's interesting case, and I think it's something that was probably considered as a minor inquiry when it first came out, and then it turned out to be a much bigger project. So, but let's turn to the panel. First, I want to introduce Poulton from Masterpiece. Jocelyn, sorry. Jocelyn has specialized in fundraising and charities and organizing events and exhibitions. Early in her career, she worked for the Arts Council of Great Britain, assisting in the organization of several major retrospective exhibitions. During years as a freelance consultant, Jocelyn's clients include BBC, Phillips Auctioneers, Trinity Hall, Cambridge, Lucy Cavendish College, Cambridge, Masterpiece London, and most recently, interim development consultant for the Sainsbury's Centre in Norwich. She is currently the managing partner of Childerley Estates in Cambridge and is vetting consultant to Masterpiece London.
In fact, Philip is going to start off.
Okay, yeah. And they will share a talk. And Hewat-Jaboor is the other speaker. And Philip advises private collectors, museums, and designers on buying and selling a wide range of paintings, furniture, and works of art. He opened his consultancy business in 1982 with the aim of providing totally independent advice to new collectors keen to acquire works of art. As an independent museum consultant, he co-curates and curates several exhibitions. And appointed as a percentage for art advisor in Jersey, he is now responsible for commissioning contemporary works for the new building on the island. From the first edition of Masterpiece London in 2010, he has chaired as the vetting of the fair, and in 2012 was appointed as chairman of Masterpiece. And your talk is titled, Informing the Public, It's All in the Label.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I am, as you've just heard, Philip Hewat-Jaboor, and I have the very great pleasure of chairing the Masterpiece Fair in London. And I'm joined today by our head of vetting, Jocelyn Poulton. I would firstly just like to thank the Catalogue Raisonné Scholars Association, Sharon and Katy in particular, for inviting us to contribute to this important and scholarly conference. It may, at first sight, seem a little odd for us, a commercial art fair, to be participating, but the subject of this conference is as exercising for us as a fair as it is from the scholarly perspective. The topics addressed yesterday and today have a direct bearing on how we approach the vetting at Masterpiece, which we will go into in some detail in due course. We are ourselves very much here to listen and to learn. As a preamble, and for those of you who may not know the fair, I will just, if I may, tell you a little bit about ourselves. In the 9 years since we started, Masterpiece has established itself as one of the world's leading international art fairs. Every year in late June, in a purpose-built structure in the south grounds of the Royal Hospital in Chelsea, we invite about 160 dealers and galleries from all over the world who represent the best in their fields to exhibit with us. It is not only, first and foremost, a place of commerce. I do see it rather as a Roman agora, a general marketplace, but also a place where all can exchange views, look, listen, and learn. And to this end, we have a series of lectures and talks. This year, for the first time, we've organised a one-day symposium devoted to next-generation museum curators who will explore the benefits of engaging with the art trade. We have also established our unique Masterpiece School of Vetting. It is absolutely vital that we have an upcoming generation in place to learn from their peers, and this is already proving extremely fruitful. The fair includes all disciplines, from classical antiquity to contemporary, furniture, paintings, works of art, modern design, and sculpture of all periods. It is the sculptural aspect, of course, of the fair that has drawn us to be here today. Every exhibit at Masterpiece is vetted by a team of over 150 leading international specialists, drawn from academia, museums, conservators, auction houses, dealers, and galleries. And I would just like to say how pleased I am to see in the audience a number of you who have vetted for us, some of whom will be this year vetting, and I hope perhaps in the future some of you may join us also. We have 27 individual vetting committees who examine each piece in their own field to ensure that the exhibit is in good condition, correctly labelled, and worthy of exhibition at Masterpiece. Fairworthiness is something that Joss is going to bring up later. Masterpiece has a well-considered set of rules and regulations covering all disciplines to which participating exhibitors must comply. The combination of our world-class exhibitors, together with the very high standards set by our vetting, is paramount to the success and excellence of the fair, giving confidence and clarity to all who visit. Ultimately, in my view, and unfashionable though it may be, it is connoisseurship that leads the way. It is essential for us that we uphold the highest standards to protect the interest of our visitors, be they our collectors, buyers, museums, or those wishing to look and to learn. We're going to raise some thoughts, share some problems we've encountered, and I know we will learn greatly from these discussions. As a fair, we have to remember that we must be strict and correct, but fair to our exhibitors, and to remember decisions that we make can have an impact on their livelihood, and we sometimes have to find a balance between the academic and commercial worlds. Our vetting criteria are constantly adjusted and updated to hopefully reflect current thinking, and where we have got things wrong, we do take this on board, discuss, and, if appropriate, amend. As you will see, we firmly believe it's all in the label.
So I'm Jocelyn, and I head up vetting at Masterpiece. I'm not an art historian in any way whatsoever. I'm what I call a facilitator. I'm there to help facilitate the explanation of the rules to the exhibitors and to make sure that the process of vetting is carried out as fairly as possible. I'm going to set the scene. I'm going to give a little more detail about vetting. I'm going to put into context some of the tensions we face, and I'll give an example of a vetting issue. And we're going to end by talking about how we find solution. As Philip has mentioned, we vet to give confidence to our visitors. And time is something that is absolutely not on our side. 160 of our exhibitors have to be up and ready in a 2-day period. So the weekend before Masterpiece opens to the public, there is organised chaos as exhibitors vie for space to move in and unpack and queue for access to stand builders, to the organisers, to sort out any issues, whether minor or major. All of this is done in order to get all their exhibits in place, fully labelled with supporting documentation to hand, in readiness for vetting, which takes place on the Monday. Our vetting is one day only. It starts at 9 and it finishes at 5 o'clock that day. Tensions are high. Adrenaline and anticipation run amok. Our exhibitors not only have invested money in taking a stand, but have also invested huge amounts of time, years, in resource of money, researching, perhaps sensitive conservation, and ultimately their own expertise in selecting works of art that they're going to put on display. And then along comes vetting. 27 committees visit every stand, look at every object, and within the space of seconds, if there's a doubt, they ask a question. And they have the option of either asking that exhibit to be relabeled or to be removed. We state that we vet to ensure that all exhibits are in good condition, fairly labelled, and worthy of exhibition at Masterpiece. And like all fairs, we have a set of general and individual vetting criteria, which we've drawn up over the years and which are pretty much shared by most of the major fairs across the world. We additionally have a fairworthy statement, which tackles the issue of quality, and all exhibits are required to conform to this. Every exhibit at Masterpiece London should be the best of its type, demonstrating sufficient quality and inherent integrity to conform to the high standards of the fair. I like this statement, and I've included it because it has resonance with the subject we're discussing today. Vetting is neither an art nor a science. It's a group of individuals who use their knowledge, expertise, and experience in handling objects to give an opinion. Our exhibitors are selected because of their knowledge, expertise, and experience, and perhaps that should be enough, but we want to be doubly sure. Vetting is an opinion, and that opinion is valid only for the period of the fair. It has no jurisdiction outside the walls of the fair, although it may have influence. On the whole, it goes well, and our exhibitors usually respond without question to a request made of them by a vetting committee. It can be positive as well as negative, and in fact this year at the fair there was a table that was dated mid-19th century. The vetting committee came along and gave it a date of 1923. He was super excited by it, and the exhibitor was thrilled because he learnt something from it, and indeed he was able to make actually perhaps more commercial gain from it. But it can be a very positive experience, and there's this wonderful exchange of knowledge and learning between the exhibitors and the vetters. But of course we do have and will encounter issues. And our solutions cause a mixture of relief, disappointment, and distress to either our vetting committee members or to our exhibitors, or perhaps even to both. And I know that there are people in this room who have experienced real disappointment. We strive to find balance. It's never perfect, but what we do try to do at Masterpiece is constantly to learn from the issues we encounter and try to improve for future years. We've encountered issues with posthumous editions, and it's why we're here. So a few months ago, unbeknown about this conference, we actually undertook our own roundtable discussion on posthumous editions to see if we could share some thoughts and perhaps tease out some conclusions. We had many questions, of course, but not all the answers. One of the things that taxed us was the question of the law. How are we able to question or challenge the legality of an artist's estate against the quality and integrity of a piece? It's such a complex issue, and this conference is really helping to address that. That aside, our discussions, there was, of course, no one view, but there has been agreement that labelling is key, and indeed a catalogue raisonné. Some people would argue that the catalogue raisonné is the Bible, but interesting talking to you yesterday about this, sometimes a catalogue raisonné takes an age to produce, or sometimes a catalogue raisonné is superseded by somebody else's. Who has the hierarchy of authority? There are all sorts of questions there. And something else that resonated with us was some wise words from one of our group, which are these. It was suggested that posthumous editions should have, quote, a respectable closeness to the lifetime of the artist. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. The information on the label and knowing how to read the information is key, and I'm going to come back to that one too. But just for a bit of fun, I've pulled out 4 examples of labels, and some I think that are good and some that are perhaps economic with the truth. This is an example of an excellent label, and it's actually using the Catalogue Raisonné of Ursulberger. There is no question about this piece at all. It's very clear. It's very good. This is not telling us very much information at all, but it does say that it's a posthumous edition. And this is from the museum up the road about Rodin, which we were talking about yesterday. And I'm going to end with a very good label, again with Rodin, which picks up some of the conversation that we talked about yesterday, of telling us of what the edition was, where this is placed in it. For us as a commercial fair, we have to find ways to be respectful to our vetting committees, responsible to the potential buyer, responsive to market trends, and reasonable to the exhibitor. So we have to find a balance between the academic view and the commercial world, between scholarship and the legality of the law. And for us, where problems arise at the fair, we have to find solution in a very, very short period of time. It's less than 12 hours. And we face this complex myriad of multifaceted perspectives, and we need to find consensus and solution. So I'm now going to give an example of an issue that happened at the fair, and I'm having to keep this quite anonymous. An exhibit was brought to the fair. It's a sculpture. It's a posthumous edition. It didn't quite conform to our rules, but there was a possibility and an argument that it might. We had huge discussions about this. The committees, the exhibitor, there was questions about its quality, its integrity. It was a question about how it fitted into our rules. There was a question about how it fitted into what we call the secondary market. Every exhibit at Masterpiece needs to have a sort of a secondary market that it can fit into. And huge discussions, and ultimately resolution could not be found through these conversations, and it ended up going to what we call an appeal. So an appeal can be granted on certain occasions. And our appeal panel is made up of a group of 4 people with expertise in the art world. It's chaired by a very eminent lawyer with art history, art market specialisation. And what the appeal panel does is they listen to the exhibitor, they listen to the vetting committees, they ask questions, and then they retire as a group to consider what the answer should be. And the one issue that came back to us with this was the legals. Because within this document, with this piece, there was a legal document that stated that the artist had given permission in his will for a certain number of editions of this piece to be made. And at the end of the day, they felt that this was a reason for it to be in the fair, and the solution was resolved through the label. And I'm going to show you on this slide, it's a label that's really, really basic because I've cut out all the information at all, but I'm going to show how it was presented initially and how we came to the conclusion of how we might be able to resolve this. So the first bit is the artist with no dates whatsoever. They then gave the artwork with the date of the original piece of the original date of the work of art. The materials, they told you what edition it was, and they said that it was cast in 2016 by the Foundry. There was lots of other information about the other pieces of the edition. They were all in a museum. So in the end, we actually came up with the second group of words that are there. First of all, we added the dates of the artist. Then we actually listed the artwork, and we made very clear that it was an edition and that the edition had been made in 2016. I have to say, looking at this label now, and having had this discussion and having prepared for this, I'm not sure that we got this label entirely correct, but it was a solution that helped us get through this particular issue at that particular time. I'm going to go back to the question of respectability, to the closeness of the lifetime of the artist. And Masterpiece decided that it needed to amend its rules because there was a sort of a loophole, if you like. So this next slide is going to show what our current and new rules are going to be for posthumous editions. Works that come from an entirely posthumous edition must be limited, authorised by direct descendants or recognised copyright holders, and in principle should have been started less than 25 years after the death of the artist. We thought that perhaps this was a little open-ended, so we proposed to add, in principle, should have been started less than 25 years after the death of the artist, but not extended beyond 50 years of the death of the artist. Then it blurs on something else going on about there. These are yet to be tested in Masterpiece, but we hope it's going to give clarity to our exhibitors as to what can or cannot be shown at our fair. Additionally, we came out from our internal discussions with the knowledge that we need to be more proactive in giving information to our visitors. And so this year we're introducing a how-to initiative. And yes, I'm going to come back to labelling. It's all very well for us who understand some of the terminology, but what about the visiting public, the layperson visiting the fair? So our first is going to be how to read a label. And we're hoping that by informing the public, it will add leverage to our exhibitors to make sure that they do label well. So what we're doing is very simple. We're including a couple of lines in the fair guide, and we're amplifying this on the web. And we talked about this yesterday, the limitation of page, but how the web can really help us amplify and explain things in greater detail. And each year we're going to add a new chapter, if you like, to the How To initiative. So next year it might be about how much restoration, what is conservation, all sorts of lovely subjects to be tackled in the future. And Philip referred to some of our talks, and this year we've got a talk which is entitled How to Read a Gallery Label, What to Look For, and Questions to Ask When Buying a Work of Art from Galleries. They're all little steps, but we hope they're going to contribute to informing the public in a more helpful way.
Joss, thank you very much for that rundown, and I do hope that you found this a useful and perhaps gentle contribution to this important debate. It really is all about full disclosure. It is all about clarity, and we truly believe it really is all in the label. The Masterpiece How-To Guide, to which Jocelyn referred, is one of the tools that we'll be using to inform our viewing public and to educate the potential collector to the importance of good labelling, whatever the field. Clarity is truly key. If the information is there, then we know where we are. It's important that we are abreast and reflect current accepted trends of scholarship, which, it goes without saying, is all important, whilst respecting the views of all those involved. Our vetting mentee scheme will allow us to bring up a new generation, fully aware of the sensibilities between the academic and commercial worlds, which I hope will prove of long-lasting benefit. A little question, perhaps, to conclude. Should we have a universal standard in labelling? Something that we should be championing? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was wondering, Jocelyn and Philip, I understand you have very little time for vetting, but do you ever contact artist estates? Are there any cases where you have the time to contact artist estates and discuss any issues, if any questions that you may have around works?
We haven't as yet. I think it would be very difficult to find the time to be able to do that. It's something that I'm becoming more and more aware of in attending a conference like this. I understand that there are more estates out there that one could, picking up on the dialogue, and that dialogue is a really important thing. One thing I've learned from this conference is that one size does not fit all. So a set of criteria that we have are very much guidelines, but at the end of the day, it's really discretion and how consensus is arrived at. We could do more, we could do all sorts of things. I do think that the web is going to be a very useful thing to be able to utilise, and I thought that Laura's definitions of what she'd put up there were actually very useful to me in actually establishing what all these terminologies were. And if we're out there to inform the public about these things, to have this kind of language that is defined is really, really helpful. But yes, I think we probably could do more by talking to artists' estates. I think the problem for us is actually not so much the more contemporary modern artists who have their artist estates, who I think have recognised the issue of posthumous editions, but it's that ground of the sort of mid-19th century to early 20th century where I think there is real confusion.
Right.
But that's my own personal opinion of seeing it.
Yeah, right.
I have a question for Jocelyn and Philip. In your 10 years of experience, have you ever experienced a liability claim by either an artist estate or a collector who bought a certain artwork at your fair, relying on what you have, decided on your vetting committee, and in a situation where somebody else has later on challenged, the results of your vetting committee activities?
No, we've not experienced that, and I think one thing to remember about the vetting that we carry out at the fair is that it is for the purposes of the fair and our exhibitors at the fair, and to protect our buyers. We are not writing rules for a broader world for future use. This is something that we have in place, as I say, to protect our visitors and to give clarity and confidence to those who are buying. We've not experienced any difficulties, as you suggest.
Thank you.
Picking up on that, on what Jocelyn said at the beginning about the judgments only holding good during and on the site of the fair, that surprised me, that it's as if everything that is judged during that day or few days disappears afterwards. Is this actually the legal status?
Our rules, most fairs will find that the vetting process is valid only for the period of the fair in which that opinion is given.
That's vastly relieving to me. I want to ask you one other question, which also struck me when you mentioned that you wanted, I forget exactly what you said, but to fit into the secondary market. What did you mean by that?
So at Masterpiece, our policy is, in a way, to show works of art that have an established market. So in some ways, we are not to use a Jossie term, a nursery ground for up-and-coming artists. So any exhibit that is shown at Masterpiece should have a secondary market, i.e. it's been in an auction or it's gone through a process of being sold, it's proven itself. And I made a reference to that because if you have a posthumous cast that is made at a very late date, there is no indication as of the moment that it's actually going to uphold its value when it's put into an auction environment.
Both in the Catalogue Raisonné and the Masterpiece vetting procedure, you're setting what is apparently a high standard of description in the labelling. And I wonder how that can be carried forward to the secondary market and to public institutions, where I don't see that level of detail and precision. And can you answer that?
If I could just say something in general about that, and having experience putting together a couple of exhibitions myself, the level of information that many institutions seem to require on their labelling, and that I think could therefore be applied to those who sell works of art at auction and elsewhere, is minimal. And I think this is changing. It needs to change. I think it's part of this general evasion, and I think it's part of this general sort of dumbing down. And I think there's an appearance at last of an understanding that if you raise the bar in any shape or form, and in life in general, but stick to labels, people are going to rise to that. And so the more information you put out, it provokes more knowledge, more interest, and more discussion. And I think you're right, there is not enough detail given in many areas that we're talking about. And it's something that we're all talking about here and trying hard to put on a new road.
All right, thank you.
Can I just come back on that? I'll speak now because I haven't got the microphone. How did the labels that we produce at Masterpiece, do they get published anywhere other than put on the wall in the exhibition?
No, I don't think they do, and it's our exhibitors who produce the labels rather than ourselves. And we work, and Joss works particularly hard with our exhibitors to encourage full, proper descriptive labelling. And if you visit the fair, and have been visiting regularly, I hope you'll find that has been improving. It's an incremental process, but it's something we are incredibly keen to ensure is done in the best possible way. Joss, do you have anything to...
Yeah, it is entirely up to the exhibitor to choose how they label, but we give very clear instructions, and each year we give even clearer instructions as we learn more ourselves. And one of the things that we do ask is that the label that is shown to the vetting committee, which is full and detailed, is always available to the visitor to be able to see as well. And we make sure that that label is consistently there throughout the entire duration of the fair, so that if you came along, you would be able to see all the condition reports, everything else, if you ask for it. And this is part of our kind of how-to, or what questions to ask, so that you can see some of the detail that's behind something that's there.
I just wanted to speak on behalf of museum labeling. My name is Thayer Tulls. I'm the curator of historic American sculpture at the Met. And admittedly, there's no consistency within the Met or at museums for labeling, but I just wanted to speak on behalf of what we do for labeling of sculpture in the American wing, which is based on our collection catalog, which was undertaken over many years. And so every object that's on view, and of course on our collections online database, has the modeling date and also has the casting or carving date. And that's presented to the public in a very transparent way. Many of our casts were commissioned by the Met from artists or artists' estates, and so we're completely upfront and transparent. And I think we don't dumb our labels down. We want our audience to understand the distinction between lifetime and posthumous So that's what I have to say. And yes, I hope that other museums aspire to trying to be as transparent in their labeling when the information is available.
I wasn't. I was not casting aspersions, if I may just interrupt on your labelling talk, which I think is exemplary. I also think there is a very different approach from labelling in this country and to where I come from, which is changing. But it is quite different. And I've done exhibitions, for example, that have been held both here in New York and in London, and the approach to labelling in both countries is completely contrary. One rather more advanced than the other.
All right, thank you, everybody.